Okay, balance sheet. Oh, I am looking for income statement. Costs and expenses. The difference between revenues and cost of sales, we have a special name for that. Okay. Or revenue minus cost of revenue or cost of goods sold is called gross profit. Especially ratio of that number to total revenue. So gross profit divided by total sales is called gross margin. That actually tells me something. It basically says, before I worry about other operating costs, financing costs, taxes, and anything like that, how many cents out of $1 of revenue I get to keep? So let's look at that for Ford. Sales equals 158,057. And cost of goods sold is 134,397. And it's GM, not to be confused with General Motors. Let's do this. Gross profit. And we could have done this in Excel, but OneNote also acts as a calculator. Hence, gross margin 23,660. About 15%. So for every dollar of, I'm assuming all of it is car sales, Ford keeps about 15 cents before other costs. Now, this tells me a story about how they sell. By the way, that cost of goods sold also includes depreciation. So not all of it is, in terms of cash, they they actually get to keep even more than that. And you have operating profit, which is gross profit minus operating expenses. These are expenses outside of cost of goods sold that are necessary for the firm to operate. You know, you pay the CEO, you do R&D, you pay rent, you transport your stuff. I don't know, you do ads, sales, marketing, what have you. And operating margin is operating profit divided by revenues or total sales. I'll use revenue, sales interchangeably. So let's look at Ford. In fact, they calculated, they made $6,276,000,000 because the units are in millions here in operating income. Hence, operating margin equals 6,276, not minus, divided by 158,057. So they get to keep only about 4%. That's not necessarily a bad number for a car company. You know, if Amazon had an operating margin of 4%, not Amazon, I'm sorry, Google, for example, they should be very unhappy. These tend to vary with respect to sectors. Retail, for example, has very low operating margin. You know, Walmart, Kroger, because they're in the business of obtaining the supply and put a little spread on it and sell it to the customers. Since there's a lot of competition, you can't buy it at 100 and sell it at 150. But if you're selling specialized stuff, of course you could. I mean, it would not be terribly surprising to see that Tesla has a much higher operating margin compared to what you want to call Ford. Why? Deserved or not, Tesla is a specialized product. Tesla automobiles. I mean, they get to command a premium. But Ford has to, compete against Toyotas, Subarus, what have you, in regular cars. In the electric sector, they're new anyway, so I don't think they have any pricing power to begin with. Tesla pretty much determines pricing power over there. So that tells another story. Then next you have, where art thou? Well, you have interest expense, that's net. You know, Ford happens to have a lot of debt, and they do pay interest on those. So it looks like they're paying about $5.25 billion. By the way, I have a new name for the Dollar Tree store, $5.25 Tree store, because all the prices have become $1.25. Sometimes you have that other income loss. They tend to be kind of one-time items. To understand if they're important, that's $5 billion. So you need to look at the notes. I'm not going to do it, but you guys can. After all of that, you have net income or income before taxes. So before taxes, Ford lost about $3 billion. And that means their taxes are negative. They're getting a tax rebate. Not necessarily a cash on that year, but it could be tax rebate against future profits. Because a company can carry forward losses for about 15 years. And Trump uses that quite a bit. Since he barely makes any money, even if he was making money, he doesn't show the profits anyway. And so net income is 2.152. As you can see, there is that 171 million. That's essentially share of minority interest in that loss. I mean, the net loss of 2.15 is an overestimate because of when you consolidate, there are firms you don't own 100% of, but you have a controlling interest. That's why you have to add up 100% of net income. But not all of that is attributable to Ford shareholders. So that's why you need to look at that number. Net income attributable to Ford Motor Company. And net of minority interest. This is income per share. We'll briefly talk about what that means. You have diluted income. That becomes an issue when you have a lot of options outstanding and that are also in the money. Do you guys remember roughly about this time last year, what's his face? The owner of Tesla or CEO of Tesla, Elon Musk, he sold a lot of Tesla shares, not because he wanted to, but he had options that were about to expire, and his so-called exercise price was around, I think, $2, and the shares were trading. No, in the old price, the exercise price was around $15. Shares were trading around $1,000, and if he had not used them, they were gonna go worthless. Of course, as soon as he exercises them, as far as IRS is concerned, he made $985 per share profit. That means a lot of taxes. He actually sold a lot of shares to cover the taxes that are due to those options that he had to exercise. Now, if Elon Musk made $985, Tesla lost $985 per share because they sold him something that's worth $1,000 in the market for $15. Because 10 years ago, they said, you have these options. At the time, Tesla was trading at $15. For the next 10 years, you have a right to buy X number of shares at $15 per share. You can't use that in the first 3 years. It's called vesting period, because you don't want people, to get their money and leave quickly. But after 3 years they're vested, you can exercise that right anytime you want. CEOs typically wait till the end. Not all of them, but they typically do. So they lost money. Okay. Until that exercise is done, you're not going to see any of that in income statements. Okay. It's called an option overhang.